Hi folks, welcome back to Canada's Boxing Channel. So, a couple of days back, I saw the report about Alexander Povetkin being banned for a 4-year period for drug use. And I looked very carefully at this, and I've got the ITA report in front of me, and the headline is, the International Testing Agency, ITA, on behalf of the International Boxing Association, reports that Alexander Povetkin, a boxer from Russia, has been sanctioned with a 4-year period of ineligibility for an anti-doping rule violation under Article 2.2 of the IBA anti-doping rules for the use of a prohibited substance based on data retrieved by the World Anti-Doping Agency from the Moscow laboratory. So, there was an investigation, and the investigation was conducted by the World Anti-Doping Agency and by a Professor Richard McLaren into allegations of systemic doping practices in Russian sport, as well as Moscow Laboratory Information Management System data retrieved by WADA. And the evidence was provided for further assessment. And the investigations uncovered data indicative of the presence of the banned substance ostarine in a sample provided by Povetkin in 2014. Now, ostarine, so the report says, is a selective androgen receptor modulator commonly used by athletes due to its muscle building and performance enhancing effects. After being notified of the case, and informed of his procedural rights, the athlete, that would be Mr. Povetkin, has decided not to challenge this. And the International Testing Agency has issued a decision sanctioning him for a 4-year period of ineligibility, so he's not going to be boxing for 4 years, commencing on the 21st of October 24 and remaining in force until the 20th of October 2028. So far, you could say, well, okay, they busted him for taking drugs over a period of time, starting in 2014, and they banned him from October last year until 2028. Well, whoopee ding dong, because actually he's retired. Like he hasn't boxed. According to BoxRec, I think his last fight was in 2021. When he lost a decision against Dillian Whyte. But that's not all, right? Because it's now going to be the case that the athlete, Povetkin, his results from the 25th of October 2014 until the start of the provisional suspension on the 21st of October last year have been disqualified, including the results obtained during a boxing match held on the night of 24/25 October 2014 in accordance with Articles 9 and 10.8 of the IBA ADR. Okay, so what that means is that from the Carlos Takam knockout, we knocked out Carlos Takam in the 10th round of their 12-round scheduled fight for the WBC silver heavyweight title, right through to his loss to Dillian Whyte. They're all going to be revised. It's going to be disqualified in each of them. Now, we can't turn the clock back. So what needs to be done here? Because if we look at, for example, Takam, Marius Bach, David Price, Hughie Fury, Dillian Whyte, who was KO'd in their first encounter, Michael Hunter, these were all losses that were incurred by these fighters in matches with Alexander Povetkin. So let's just look at the Dillian Whyte first fight. It occurred on August the 22nd, 2020. So within the period of time that Povetkin's going to have all these results DQ'd. And that was for the WBC Interim World Heavyweight and WBC Diamond Heavyweight. So, it was a 5th round knockout. I think it was a vicious uppercut, if I remember. So Dillian Whyte does not get the chance to go on. If you imagine the fight is like a fork in the road, he loses, he goes one way. Had he won, he would have gone another way. But we can't turn the clock back. Ditto for Hughie Fury. Ditto for David Price. Ditto for everybody who lost against him during that period of time. And arguably even people who beat him. So Anthony Joshua beats him on September the 22nd, 2018. He TKOs him in the 7th round for the IBF World Heavy, IBO World Heavy, and WBO World Heavy. But AJ was now, as we know, fighting a guy who was doped up on a substance that is a performance-enhancing substance. So I would say that since we can't turn the clock back and make everybody back to where they were, it's just, impossible, what can we do? Well, when I was working for a living, I had more than a passing familiarity with both criminal law and civil litigation. So the only two things that I will say is that what you know and what you prove are not necessarily the same thing. And with respect to civil litigation, the only thing we know about the law is the cost. So with those two caveats in place, however, I would suggest that each of the fighters, particularly those who lost significant matches where, had they won, they can show that their career would have taken a different path, likely have a cause of action, which is lawyer speak for at least the underlying basic foundation for commencing a civil suit. Whether or not those suits will be successful or not is a matter for judges to decide. But prima facie, they look like from their face that they have some legs. And what could be done? Well, it would be damages by way of financial compensation. Now, one doesn't know what kind of money Mr. Povetkin has, or perhaps more importantly in this case, where Mr. Povetkin's assets are located. There are certain places where one can retrieve assets more easily than others. Mr. Povetkin may have put his money in a trust domiciled in the Turks and Caicos and administered through, Jersey and the Channel Islands, for all I know. It could be in Liechtenstein. It could be in any number of places where it's hard to get at. But getting a judgment against Mr. Povetkin would in fact be the starting point, and then one can, if you have enough money yourself, engage further mechanisms to try and squeeze that money out. It's an easy thing to say, you just go after him and get millions of dollars or whatever in compensation. Yeah, that's an easy thing to say, but in practice it's very difficult to do. Where his money is unknown to, well, certainly unknown to me. But I would suggest that there is a basic grounds for commencing legal action. I think there's also a case to consider commencing legal action against others. Who knew what when, and to put it in very layman's-like terms, were there people around Povetkin who knew and who may have assets that are possibly not quite so well hidden? These are questions, of course, that the lawyers for people like Carlos Takam and Dillian Whyte and others would be chewing over, no doubt. But I think one of the ways to sort of deal with this problem, the problem of taking drugs, performance-enhancing drugs, has to be a twofold one. Results have to be known more quickly. Bans have to be meaningful. So there's a massive risk to your career if you're caught taking PEDs. And I think that civil litigation is the way to deal with a lot of this. So if you've been in a ring with somebody who has subsequently been found to have performance-enhancing drugs in their system, sue them. Sue them really aggressively. Make it financially so risky that people will consider not taking PEDs. And so this would go hand in hand with aggressive and proactive testing. That's my view. It's a combat sport we're talking about here. And I'm not saying it would be any less important if it was running or something like that. But if you lose a running race to somebody who's on a PED, yes, that's bad. But to get into a ring, to engage in a combat sport with somebody who's juiced up, has a much, much greater risk associated to it. You can be killed. So we've got to do something. When I say we, fans have to be interested enough in this, and we have to bring back credibility to the sport. Because if you think that whichever fighters we're talking about are juiced, it brings not only the entire sport into disrepute, but it actually jeopardizes the very future of the sport. So that's a serious take on a very serious subject. As always, please let me know in the comments section what you think, and whether or not you think that civil litigation together with aggressive regulatory action is the right way to go about it. I know that there's another school of thought which says let people take anything they want. I don't agree with that, because of the risk that nobody wants to see anybody get killed in the ring. At least if you do, then this probably isn't the channel for you, right? But let me know what you think. As always, please please subscribe if you haven't already, and have a fabulous day. Thanks very much. Cheers.